Hey, Astronomy 152. Today I just wanted to post a quick kind of video lecture about the stellar classification schemes. There are two of them, and so we want to talk about the different ways that we can classify stars, all right? So that way we can compare them to the sun or to each other and have a basis for comparison. I like to think of this as it's good to know the difference between a Porsche and a Mustang as far as for cars, right? And be able to recognize the difference. So that's what we want to be able to do with stars as well, to be able to group them into categories. Because of course that's the way people are. We like to group things into categories and stereotype them. I know that sounds bad, but that's the way we think, and it helps for us to wrap our heads around things like that. At any rate, the first type of stellar classification scheme is called the Hipparchus's magnitude scale. And what this is, it's a brightness scale. The brighter or the brightness of the star, it gives its magnitude. There's two different types of magnitude. There's called an apparent magnitude, which is probably what we'll talk about most. That's what we'll calculate in another later video. But there's also an absolute magnitude, and this would be if you were to place the star 10 parsecs away, what would its magnitude be then? If you can compare absolute magnitudes, and actually absolute magnitude is directly proportional to the star's overall brightness. So at any rate, that's neither here nor there, but I just wanted to discuss this Hipparchus's magnitude scale so you could wrap your head around it. Hipparchus, 200,000 years ago or something, decided that he was going to name the stars in the sky and order them, and he was going to call, oh look, that one is the brightest one, like Sirius, and he was going to call that 1. That would be a magnitude 1, and it would be the brightest one. And then a magnitude 2 one would not be as bright as a magnitude 1. It would be, actually, it's about half as bright as a magnitude 1, but that's another discussion for, again, when we're talking new numbers. But basically, Hipparchus came up with a system between 1 and 5, with 1 being the brightest stars that he could see, and 5 being the dimmest stars that he could see. This is with your naked eye, of course. And nowadays, this scale has been changed or whatever, so that it goes all the way up to 26 for distant galaxies. They're not very bright, and so they actually have a huge magnitude of 26. All right, now that's pretty interesting, and we have that, and I really want to point out to you that the magnitude scale, the apparent magnitude, is a backward scale, so that the brighter the thing is, the smaller its magnitude is. So for instance, the sun, which is one of the brightest objects we have, of course, apparently, its apparent magnitude is negative 26. It's really small. The full moon has an apparent magnitude of around negative 15. Venus has an apparent magnitude of around negative 3. Sirius, the brightest star. Now, according to Hipparchus, he would have called that a magnitude 1 star, but we've messed with his scale a little bit and made it a little bit more numeric, and I think Sirius actually has about a negative 1 magnitude, apparent magnitude. After apparent magnitude, you go up to 5, and at 5 you've reached the limit of what you'd be able to see with your unaided eye. If you had a pair of binoculars, you could see something up to about a 7 or an 8 at any rate. So for instance, Neptune, the planet, would have about an 8 for apparent magnitude. And then galaxies, which are dim, Andromeda, I think, has an apparent magnitude somewhere around 12. That means that you need a telescope to be able to see it. Anything that has an apparent magnitude over 12, you would need a telescope in order to view that object. At any rate, Hubble with the deep sky goes all the way up to 26 for an apparent magnitude. But herein is an interesting thing, which is if you notice going from the sun to a bright star from -26 to 1, that you know, that's about 26 magnitudes different. And well, if you go 26 magnitudes bright or dimmer than the brightest star, and you go all the way up to 26 magnitude, you'd have the dimmest objects ever recorded by people, and at this time, at any rate. And then the other thing that I think is an interesting point, what I actually wanted to say is Hubble Deep Sky, where he's taken images of 26 magnitude. Hey, sorry about that. I don't know why it cuts out on me every once in a while like that, but it just does. Okay, so on the magnitude scale, you'll notice that the sun is as bright compared to Sirius as Sirius is to the deepest sky objects that Hubble has ever seen. And that's kind of interesting. So at any rate, Hipparchus's backwards magnitude scale, remember, the larger the magnitude, the less bright the object is, at any rate. And so the second type of stellar classification scheme I wanted to talk about was the spectral type of stellar classification. On stellar classes, you have different classes of stars, with O-class stars being the... Hey, I don't know if I've got the camera working or not, but we're going to try. Anyway, I wanted to talk about the stellar classification scheme, which is based off the colors of the stars or their absorption spectrum. This is OBAFGKM. You can remember that by an acronym OB, a fine girl, kiss me, and that will be the different star colors. O being the hottest and the brightest, they're also the youngest lived, whereas M class stars are the dimmest and coolest, and they also live the longest. All right. Now these are on main sequence, and that'll be an important point. But how this stellar classification scheme with colors goes is you have a continuous spectrum, and you'll have certain colors missing or absorbed by the photosphere of the star, and those colors, the number of absorption lines that are missing are of course what this stellar classification scheme is based on. So the hotter it is, the less lines it'll have in its spectrum, whereas the M class stars will have a lot of absorption lines in its spectrum. At any rate, so this is our second major type of stellar classification, and it's based off of the color of the stars more than the intensity of light coming from the stars. All right, at any rate, so that's our second type, and those are our two types of stellar classifications. One, Hipparchus's magnitude scale, which is a brightness scale, and the second one is the OBAFGKM, which is based off of the color or the color or temperature of the star. All right. At any rate, both of these are ways of being able to group or categorize stars, and every self-respecting astronomy student should know them. All right. Anyway, hopefully we'll get this tacked onto the video, and we'll post it soon. Good luck to you guys in Astronomy 152. Bye-bye.